It's time for the nerd shit. This is where we go through the path of building. I explain how this build works, how everything works together, because this is a kind of a complicated build. There's a lot of moving parts, but we are going to go over that. This, in its entirety, is a Herald of Agony build. We are not going to be doing any DPS ourselves. We are going to be buffing our Herald to output some very decent lead DPS and also maintaining a very high survivability. So, before I do get started, I do want to shout out Rakim's build. This build is heavily inspired and based off Kim's original 75 Virulence Herald of Agony. I will leave a link to the Path of Exile thread where I found the original build, because this build is heavily inspired. I played around with his build and I wanted to make it my own. I changed passives, I altered the passives, I altered the gems, I altered the gearing, and made it to what it is today. So let's get started on explaining how this build works together. I have a list here. Alright, clusters. First of all, this is not a league starter. Though you can, I suppose, in theory, start this as a league starter and just start building towards it. This is definitely a build to finish the league, to finish your challenges and complete the bulk of the content, if not all the content. You would have seen the pros and cons section prior to this. That pretty much covers everything that this build can do and can't do. Now let's start with the clusters. We are using a Voices with a 5 passive. That goes into 3 medium clusters, all using Pure Agony. Pure Agony is the most important clusters we need for this build, because it allows our Herald to stack those Virulence up to 75 no matter what. Now, we want to do that because the more stacks, the higher the damage. Go down to 0 stacks right there. We are only doing just shy of 200,000, and that is on normal mobs. That's not even on bosses. So, we want to be able to get our Virulence stacks right up there to do the maximum amount of damage possible, and we do that by stacking poisons incredibly quickly to buff our minion. All 3 of these pretty much the same node. We move on to our little cluster here. I just went ahead and got some metal. You can opt out of doing that if you want, to save a little bit of money, but more survivability is always good. We're looking at 5k survivability right there in the HP pool. Over on the right hand side, we have a very similar setup. We are using all the nodes to have Pure Agony. Now, I have gone ahead and added a node with Cult Leader. This is something you can choose to do further on. It is a rather costly cluster duel because it does have Cult Leader and Pure Agony together. You can choose to not use this and put this single point elsewhere, but I use it just to increase our damage. Now over here we have the Calamitous Visions. This is incredibly important to the build. This allows us to only have 1 Herald and no auras. However, it increases the damage output of our Herald substantially. As you can see, 50% more effect of Herald, 100% more damage from hits from Herald, 50% more damage over time. It's very important because we do use bleed, and minions from Herald skills deal 25% more. Beautiful stuff. We need this. We want this. Next over here we have Feast of Flesh. Now this is incredibly important for our sustain. We gain a lot of sustain using our on hits. Now, it's not leech, it's not anything else, it is the on-hit modifier. Anything that's classed as a hit will proc our life and mana, which we will get to in a little bit just after the clusters. Next, over here, I have gone ahead and grabbed another battle. Now, you may have noticed that a lot of these jewels have intellect added to them, and some also have some resistances and regen and such. But the most important thing is intellect. This is incredibly tight build because we are using a champion. He doesn't have a whole lot of nodes that have intellect in them. Specifically, we literally have one single intellect node. So getting intellect is an absolute pain, but it is required to run the herald at its max power. This is the entirety of the build. You can see all here. Moving on to the sustain. Right. When I was talking about sustain, I mean keeping our virulence stacks up at 75, 100% of the time, as much as possible. It also means keeping our poison stacks up 100% of the time, as much as possible. Because we are using the golden rule cluster jewel, Viridian jewel. That allows us to reflect poison onto us, but also give us 1% of chaos resistance per poison. That stacks up to 100. So we can get additional 100% poison chaos resistance, which you can see right here. I have calculated that as if we were in combat with 100. Otherwise, things can be a bit hairy. Now, that is one thing that you can mitigate with gearing. I have been relatively unlucky doing that, however. So you can mitigate this with gearing, but until you do, you will want to get that poison 100% at 100, almost 100% of the time. You want that thing up. You want it up. Next, we have our major timeless. Now we are using a timeless with devotion to the Kara in Akara of Bala, conquered by Marikath. This adds us a Sudo-Mageblood. Absolutely incredible. Actually, for what it is, and it's also relatively cheap. I think I got this for like one divine. It gives you this, the Traitor. Flask gains 4 charges per empty flask slot every 5 seconds. This is beautiful. If you only have 3 utilities flasks. If you have more than that, it will not be enough to sustain permanent uptime. And you will need to use the reuse at the end of the flask effect and have a very high increased charge recovery modifiers on each one of those. We will go over this in the gearing section, but for now, that is a Sudo-Mageblood, which allows us to keep our resistances up at 82%, 100% of the time while we're in a map or fighting a boss. And with this jewel, I also get 25% chance to gain Alchemist Genius when using a flask. Over here, if I can find it, Alchemist Genius will enable 20% increased flask charge gain, very good for keeping our flasks up, and increase flask effect by 10%, increasing our resistances up a single %. Not amazing, but you know, it is something. And it's essentially something for free because we're going that path anyway. What else is important to show you? I might go over some further sustain stuff. So, managing sustain. We're going to have most of our mana reserved. That means we're not going to have a whole lot of mana to work with. Because of that, it is incredibly important that we get an item that has mana on hit. Let's see, where is that? There's my item. There it is. So I have an item that says gain 3 mana per enemy hit with attacks. Incredibly important we have this. If we do not have a gain mana per hit, you are going to have a very difficult time managing your mana. You can get mana gain on hit on rings, I believe amulets, and I'm pretty sure you can get it on gloves as well, but you can also get it on jewels. So if you do not have it on your gear, you can swap out one of these ghastly eye jewels for it. On top of that, we are using this battle rouse, which 10% of damage taken recouped as mana. Incredibly important for maps that have no regen. Which means you can jump into a group of enemies and they will damage you and make you be able to use more mana. We also use the mana mastery for more sustain. On top of that, we are also using a skill gem that gives us life on hit. As you can see, we are utilizing on hit effects incredibly high. Incredibly high? That is the wrong wording. We use them a lot. So that is sustain. I'm now just going to do a quick overview of the entirety of the tree. If you want to skip this part, there will be timestamps below, but we're just going to go over the tree real quickly, so you have a brief idea of any important keynodes, stuff we use to keep us at good suppression and mana and health. So starting off, we just skip all of this. We go straight down here. We grab Art of the Gladiator and Bravery to increase our health and our attack speed, and accuracy doesn't really matter because we are using a trick in Ascendancy, which we'll get to. Over here, we want to go to Shock Avoidance and then Crystal Skin to get that 1% extra elemental resistances. The 20% increased physical projectile damage that we get from this is nothing. It doesn't affect us. It's all kind of wasted stat, I guess. But over here, I've opted to go Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. This is optional for you. You do not have to select this if you have a jewel that has Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you, but they can be really expensive for what we're going to be gearing. So keep that in mind. Moving on up, we grab Profane Chemist, which also increases our life. And, well, it increases our life and the effectiveness of our Life Flask. Over here we have Mage Bane, which allows our dexterity to help us with our spell suppression. As you can see, we have 100% spell suppression over here, 75% chance to block, and 41% spell block. Up here, we just have even more spell suppression. Over here, this is where we pop our Golden Rule, and we get some more resistances as well. We've already discussed this circle. Up here, we grab more life, a 52 maximum life. Moving on down, we grab this circle. We put a Ghastly Eye Jewel in there because we actually stacking Ghastly Eye Jewels to use with Amenamu's Gaze. This is very much a min-max item. I would suggest not getting this until the very last item you get for the build. Moving down, we grab the Armor Circle. Again, increasing 1% to all our elemental resistances. Now, I opt to go to, you take 30% reduced extra damage from criticals. That'll help us with normal pack mobs when we are running through tier 17 maps. Very scary. We want as much damage reduction as possible. Over here, pretty simple, life node. Going down here, I've already explained this. These clusters are all Ghastly Eye Jewels. Well, these two are Ghastly Eye Jewels. We've already gone over the other stuff. Moving on to the right side and going downwards, I've gone ahead and put a tattoo of Ramako Shaman This is entirely optional, but I found it gets us up to 100%. So I went ahead and did that. Boom. Moving down, we have marked enemies grant 20% increased flask charges to you. Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Moving over here, we get the Culling Strike. This is amazing for clearing. Culling Strike is always good on any build. And over here, we have marked enemy. Marked enemy cannot deal critical strikes. Also good. That makes this a little bit less useful, but a lot helpful if they're not marked. You don't want to get one shot from off on the other side of the screen, and that's why we choose that. We've already covered all of these. Moving on up here, we go ahead and grab a life circle, and I choose to go with the skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. So again, that helps us with our sustain. It is not entirely necessary, but I find that paired with everything else makes mana not really an issue. Moving on over, we grab the entirety of the spell suppression circle, and we grab spell suppression mastery, which makes suppressed spell damage is lucky, making sure we have that 100%. Over here, we grab some flask nodes, and then we grab increased duration, and it allows us to have increased effect, again stacking with the other sources of increased effect, and it removes maim and hinder when you use a flask, because we're constantly using flasks. Maim and hinder don't really mean a whole lot to us. So that is the base tree. Moving over to the ascendancy, we have the unstoppable hero. 20% increases attack speed while fortified. We always fortified. Because of a fortified, you have 20 fortified. Cannot be stunned and increase armor. Beautiful stuff. Over here, we start taunting. Taunting allows us to do even more damage, which is absolutely lovely. That's what we want. And moving over here, we have enemies taunted by you take 20% increased damage and cannot be evaded. Now evasion, very good, which means we don't have to worry about the accuracy or anything like that, because our hits are going to hit. That's what we want. That is the tree. All right, next section is the gems and gearing. I'm reading this off a list I wrote. All right. Storm Rain. Storm Rain is the main way we get our poison stacks up. Now, I have tested every single bow skill in the game, and Storm Rain just reigns supreme when it comes to how many times it actually hits, because it leaves arrows on the ground which link up to each other and continuously hit the enemy. Now, these arrows actually class as you hitting the enemy as well. Unlike other arrow type things which spread poison pods and such on the ground, they don't class as you hitting, but these arrows do. So as you can see, that would allow your on-hit effect to skyrocket. We're getting crazy amounts of HP return, crazy amounts of mana return, and our virulence and poison stacks are gaining incredibly fast. Next, we just link that to more projectiles, faster attacks, momentum, life gain on hit, which I was talking about before. Again, every time it hits, you get life, lots of life. And of course, chance to poison, which is very important. Moving on, we have Sniper's Mark with Mark on Hit. So every time we hit, the Sniper's Mark should be applied unless they're immune or something like that. Blink Arrow of Bombarding. This is a very important offensive ability. This is normally used as a movement ability, but we use it as an offensive ability because every time we jump into a group of enemies, it will spawn clones. Now, these clones will attack and have a 44% chance to grant Feeding Frenzy, which affects our Herald of Agony. Now, Feeding Frenzy is a massive boost in damage. As you can see, we are sitting at 11 million. Boom, we pop Feeding Frenzy off. We are at 10 million. We lose an entire million damage. So it is important that you use Blink Arrow very often as an offensive buff. Moving over, we have Ensnaring Arrow linked to Mana Forged. This allows us to make the enemies always classed as moving. When they're moving, they take more damage from bleed, and they're all going to be bleeding from our herald. Over here we have automation and convocation. Basically, it allows us to keep our minion on us. We also have a Val Molten Shell with cast when damage taken. I've disabled that so we can see our effective HP. If we enable that, obviously our effective HP goes through the roof. This will only obviously proc when you take damage. We also have the Val version we can use as a oh shit button, which I use relatively regularly when I'm fighting bosses or a large pack of mobs is kind of scary and I jumped into the middle of them. Next we have Enduring Cry and Call to Arms. This is a no-brainer skill. It allows us to recover life every time it procs, and it allows us to get endurance charges. As you see over here, I've clicked the endurance charges. If I click that, we lose a lot of effective HP. But if I click it, which it should be up the majority of the time, then we get a lot of effective HP. Ignore that. That's my off weapon. I use it to level gems. Now, on my ring, this is very important. You must have vulnerability. We got a lot of extra damage income from vulnerability. Now you may be thinking, we have Sniper's Mark and vulnerability. That's 2 curses. How do we do that? Very easy. Our amulet has Whispers of Doom. You scroll out here, move all the way up here. This bad boy, you can plant an additional curse. That's it. Just make sure you have that on your amulet. Pretty straightforward. I think I've gone over everything except for the Herald. Herald of Agony. Now, the idea is to get this bad boy up as higher level as possible. You want to have him up around level 30 up. So, we get lots of stuff that increases his level. As you can see, he's currently in level 30. Herald. We use Empower. Just get the best of power you can get. Volatility, which is a no-brainer for any kind of bleed build. Awaken Vicious Projectiles, again, no-brainer. Damage on full life. Your Agony is invulnerable. He's immortal. Never is not on full life. So that's an easy socket. Awaken minion damage, once again, easy socket. It also gives us a +1 to the minion itself. Alright, so that is, I think we covered everything. Yes, I believe so. Alright, moving over to items. The Widow Hail bow and the rear guard. This is our main setup for our weapons, and both of them cheap as shit. So we use the Widow Hail, which 248% increased bonus gains from equipped quiver. Beautiful stuff. Try and get it as high as you can get it. It's a maximum of 250. Next we have the rear guard. Obviously, this allows us to block as a archer. And it's giving us a bunch of armor. It is giving us a bunch of projectile speed. And we actually got a roll for a +10% chance to suppress spell damage, which is awesome. You want to aim for that. It is not necessary for early building this, but you definitely want to aim to get one with a 10% chance to suppress, because that'll of course become what, 24%. So these two are pretty much 100% needed. You don't want to do any damage, because if you do damage, then you start getting hit by elemental reflect and physical reflect. Whereas we want to be immune to that, so we don't use it, and we also want lots of stock. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Your helmet. You need a helmet with +2 level of minion skill gems. Everything else doesn't really matter. Try to get some resistances, maybe. If you're lacking intelligence, get intelligence. What else? If you're lacking life, get life. But the most important role on your helmet is that +2 level of all minion skill gems, because Agony is classed as a minion, and we want to keep him leveled up. Next, we have Lion's Eye Vision. This is where we put our Agony. We are going to be having him supported by level 15 Pierce. Very important that we do this, because having an Agony that doesn't pierce is kind of sucks. However, we also have a corrupted role that you can get. It's a little bit more expensive than the base, but it is doable with a +1 to level of socketed gems. Another level into our Agony. Over here on our gloves, you're going to want to try. Now, this is one of those things that's an absolute pain to get, but some mods, whether it be a explicit or built in, you want chance to poison on hit. Because more chance to poison on hit means more virulence stacks, more poison stacks, more survivability, more damage. If you cannot find one with poison, don't worry too much about it. Use it as something to aim for. It is not 100% required. It is incredibly helpful, however. Over here on the boots, I just use boots as a resistance dump. I'll just get the boots with the highest resistance possible. That's basically it. Amulet. Now, this is where stuff gets kind of expensive. You want to get one with +1 level to all skill gems and +1 level to all chaos skill gems. If you can't get both, try to get one with at least one of them, because we need those levels. That's how we get our damage. Over here, again, we've already discussed this. I have mana per enemy hit. Very important to have. If you can roll attack speed on your items as well, that's something to consider. But let's keep moving. Circle of Nostalgia. This is a build essential. You need this. You need this. You shouldn't be doing the build otherwise. You want Agony Crawler deals X increased damage, and Agony has X increased mana reservation efficiency. Try to get as good rolls as you possibly can, but the important thing with this one is the curse enemies with vulnerability on hit. We need that because we cannot fit that anywhere else, and we need vulnerability on hit. Get that. Now this bad boy is absolutely incredible. Darkness Enthroned. We are using that to allow our minion to do as much bleed damage and have as high a bleed chance as possible. Now this increases the effects of socketed abyssal jewels. It can go up to 100, but 100%, it's going for like 10 divine at the moment, which is not worth it. When you can get 99 for like 2 divine. It's crazy. It's crazy. Alright. With the jewels, again, you want to get stats. So if you have intellect, you're lacking intellect, get intellect. Lacking dexterity, which can happen, get dexterity. But most importantly, you want chance to bleed. You want chance to bleed on all of your Ghastly Eye jewels. And you only want Ghastly Eye jewels because eventually, again, use this as the last option, last item you acquire. Get this jewel. Minions have a +6% to damage over time per Ghastly Eye jewel, affecting you up to a maximum of 30%. So we want as many Ghastly Eye jewels as possible. This is classes as a Ghastly Eye jewel, so we have 12, 18. 18, 24, 30. We have the maximum 30% using these two. So you're going to want to have only ghastly eye jewels, and you're going to want all of them to have bleed chance. Beautiful stuff. All right. For flask, we are not immune to bleeding, but we are immune to corrupted blood. So you're still gonna want a bleed removal life flask, and this one is a startled eternal life flask, so basically instant recovery on low life. You always want an old shit life flask. That kind of goes with every single build ever existed. You kind of want this shit. Over here, now we're moving into that Sudo-Mageblood area. We have each one of the resistances here. I have gone ones with 49% increased charge recovery on each one. That is the maximum. Okay, apparently 50% is the maximum. That is the maximum before it starts getting minus duration or other downsides with that. Now with the secondary modifier, you can have, I would suggest increase attack speed. As we said before, attack speed affects how much you stack those virulent stacks and poison stacks. Very important that you have attack speed. And I also went for increased armor. So it just makes me tankier, which can't go wrong. I also have increased movement speed. Now this is a personal preference, just because I hate slow builds, but this is a relatively slow build. You're going to be walking relatively slow through things. You're not going to be running very fast. So I opted to have the increased movement speed on there. However, the best role that you would want for that is to get the role where it has a chance to shock. Because we're using a lightning ability. If you start shocking things, they're going to take even more damage, and it'll just make clearing a lot easier. Now we've already gone through over all the clusters, so I won't go over that again. Let's have a look. What's on the agenda now? Right. T17 and Ubers. This build is capable of doing all content. I have done Simulacrum 30. I have done all of the pinnacles. I have completed tier 17s with this build. Now the caveat is, I'm slow. I am slow. I do not have the reflexes to do Ubers. However, the ones I have done, I have seen that it is enough DPS and it is enough tank to survive the majority of attacks in Uber fights. I'm just too slow to do it. Now, I will show a short clip of me trying to do some of the Ubers and getting one shot by mechanics. I really should be able to dodge myself. But I am of the opinion this is a 100% Uber viable build. And of course, it's tier 17 viable, and pretty much any content below tier 17 and Uber's boss. This can actually be used for quite effectively in Delve, rituals, any league mechanic. It kind of excels because you're not the one doing the damage. So a lot of stuff does not come back to you. Now I'm going to move on to the showcase videos a little bit more than what you guys saw in the beginning of this video. And you can see that we can tank a decent amount in Ubers, but I'm just slow. I will also show you a run of a T17 Boss, which goes relatively well. I think we died once. Again, I am not... I'm not young, so my reflexes are not as good as most players. So I'm just going to put that out there. Yes, this build is capable of Ubers. No, I am not capable of Ubers. Alright, moving on to the gameplay. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe. It does really help. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Stopped. Obstacles destroyed. Failure, ambivalence, death, a final abyss.